Okay, so just a little housekeeping. I want to make sure that everybody is able to fully participate in tonight's info session. So make sure that you join your audio and you can submit questions in the chat at any point. We are going to break for questions at 3 different points during the presentation, but you can put your questions in the chat at any point, and either Henry will answer them or I will answer them when we get to that Q&A portion. And then we also are recording the webinar, so we'll make sure to share a link with everybody who RSVP'd. If you do have to leave early, you will still get the recording so you can see all of it. And I want to take this opportunity to thank our partners. They are a key to a successful co-op, and we run the co-op in close cooperation with these awesome partners. We are lucky enough to work with the Hazelwood Initiative and the City of Bridges Community Land Trust, as well as 350 Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania Interfaith Power and Light, Connect, and the boroughs of Edgewood, Carnegie, and Oakmont. We're really excited to be able to work with these partners. So Henry and I are from Solar United Neighbors. We run and manage the solar co-op, and SUN is a membership-based national nonprofit organization. We organize around solar policy issues. We're not a solar installer. In fact, we're vendor neutral. And we really focus on consumer advocacy, on solar education, and outreach in the community. And that's really born out of how SUN got started. In 2007, our founder, Anya Schoolman, gathered a group of her neighbors in Mount Pleasant in Washington, D.C., and they decided that they were all going to go solar together. They realized that the process can be incredibly complex. There's legal jargon in your contract. You have to parse the sales pitch and understand the technical nuances of solar. And it's difficult, or it can be, for a single family to go solar on their own. But by banding together, they were able to draw on each other's expertise, as well as get a good deal on solar through the power of group purchase. And so that became the first solar co-op for SUN. It was the Mount Pleasant Solar Co-op. And in the 15 years since then, we now have members in all 50 states. We have field staff in 11 states and Washington, D.C. And we've run 315 solar co-ops, which has helped over 6,400 homes go solar. And that's had the effect of installing 54 megawatts of solar, which has offset over 830,000 tons of carbon emissions. We're very proud of these numbers. Our model is that we help people go solar, join together, and fight for their energy rights. And going solar, we help people do that either through the co-op or by themselves. And that includes homeowners, businesses, nonprofits, houses of worship, and that list grows constantly. We bring people together through events like this info session, at solar tours, at happy hours and lobby days, and we provide resources to help solar enthusiasts effectively advocate for their rights. And that covers policies like net metering, making sure that members of HOAs have access to solar, and so many other policy initiatives that are battles we're fighting across the country, but many of them are right here in Pennsylvania. So our Pennsylvania program started in 2018, and since that time, we have helped 109 people go solar through the co-ops. And that's been the installation of over 1 megawatt of solar capacity. Our homeowners in the co-ops have installed nearly $3 million in their local solar economy. That's helped create 20 jobs. And that's been the effect of saving about $4.3 million over the lifetime of their solar panels, or 25 years. And they've helped to offset nearly 13,000 metric tons of carbon emissions. So now that you can see the benefits of the co-op, I want to take a minute and address the inequities in our current energy system. It's something that we at Sun are working in an effort to address. Communities of color, particularly Black communities, bear an unfair share of the cost of energy production and receive fewer of the benefits. Families of color are disproportionately harmed by higher utility bills and shutoffs. On top of that, housing discrimination has long been a barrier to home ownership and thus solar ownership. When Sun started with a group of economically and racially diverse neighbors, they focused on solar because it helped people pay their bills. It also helped them stay in their homes at a time when DC was being gentrified quickly, and it was at the time that the whole country was in the middle of a financial crisis. Rooftop solar lets communities invest locally, it creates good local jobs, and brings control of the energy system within our reach. Sun is working toward a new energy system that everyone can participate in, one that is fair and equitable. Part of the Allegheny County Solar Co-op is a program where we are hoping to provide at least 9 free solar installations to low-income households. So we have been generously donated $100,000 through local philanthropic foundations, and these are going to be 5 kilowatt solar installations that are available as long as you meet 4 criteria. You have to live in Hazelwood, have a household income that's low enough based on the chart on the right. You have to have the title to your home in your own name, and this is really to help with permitting requirements. And if you're a customer in the customer assistance program for Duquesne Light, solar won't really be able to lower your bills any further than they are. So if you want to apply for the free system, if you think that you're qualified, you can indicate this on your application when you join the co-op, and then we or our partners will follow up with you to confirm your eligibility, and we will likely ask for more documentation confirming your income. And then the free systems are going to be allocated to the first eligible co-op members who are ready to sign a contract with the installer until that funding is gone. So now let's get into the co-op and how the solar co-op works. We're going to have this presentation in 3 parts. The first is solar technology, then we'll go over the financials of going solar, and then we'll wrap up with how a solar co-op works. And then at the end of each section, we'll do a question and answer period. So feel free to drop questions in the chat as they come up, and then they'll either be addressed at the time or during the Q&A portion. So tonight, when I talk about solar, what that's a shorthand for is solar photovoltaics or solar PV. This converts solar energy into electricity. It is still the primary solar technology. And so solar panels are primarily composed of the array of blue solar cells. So they're still mostly silicon in this market, and they're put together to form a solar panel or module. And then all of the other components in the panel exist to protect the solar cells. So there is tempered glass, and there's a polymer encapsulant as well as a frame, and it really keeps the whole panel sturdy and gives the solar cells a nice long lifetime while protecting it from weather events. So when you put a few panels together, that is what's called a solar array. And when we talk about solar systems, it's really helpful to talk about it in terms of the size, because solar panels are like light bulbs, and that each one is going to be spec'd at a different wattage. So an entire system you would talk about it as kilowatt system, which is 1,000 watts. So the example at the bottom is 12 350 watt panels. So the whole array is a 4.2 kilowatt array. And these panels are actually drawn to scale compared to the person on the left. So the panels themselves are about 3.5 feet by 5.5 feet, and then they usually weigh about 40 pounds. So the average size solar array in Pennsylvania for a residential system is typically between 4 and 15 kilowatts. For residential, you can go all the way up to 50 kilowatts. And you would size your system based on, how much space you have on your roof or your land, as well as your energy needs and your budget. So a kilowatt or a watt is a measure of power. It's instantaneous. It's as the sun hits the solar panel. But if you take power sustained over time, that's a kilowatt hour, that is energy. And that unit you've probably seen on your electric bill. So the panels themselves are going to be mounted to the roof in a few different ways, really depending on the type of roof that you have. So here is a pitched asphalt shingle roof, pretty common. In this case, the hole would be drilled through the roof to the rafters to make sure that you have a really secure connection. And then the penetration point is sealed up with a silicone sealant, and then there's metal flashing so that water sheds away from the connection points. And installers do the mounting so that there's no leaking. If you have a standing seam metal roof, this is really easy installation because you just clamp the panels to the seams. So there's no penetration, then you can avoid leaks altogether. The other option, if you have a completely flat roof but no standing seam, is going to be a ballasted system where the panels themselves are just weighted down to the roof. And metal roofs are great because they last 50 years, which is going to be relevant when we talk about the suitability of your roof for solar. So there are 4 criteria that you have to meet to have a roof that's good for solar. The first is that you do want it to be facing south, and it doesn't have to be due south. It can be anywhere from due west to due south to due east. You just really want to avoid northern facing. And then you want to have as little shade as possible. That's just so that you have as much sun hitting the panels as possible, so you can maximize your power production. Small amounts of shade is fine, and your installer is going to do a rigorous shade analysis to make sure that your roof is a good fit for solar. Thirdly, you do want to have enough space to mount the panels. So the amount we typically recommend is 250 square feet, and you really want that to be contiguous. So as that space gets broken up by dormers or chimneys, you start to lose efficiency in all of the missed connections. And then some installers do have a minimum size requirement. So that is something that you as a co-op member will find out, so that you know if your roof is large enough to support the solar system that's right for your home. And then finally, you do want a new-ish roof. So a solar system usually takes about 8 to 12 years to pay for itself. So ideally, you would have a roof that lasts that length of time. So we tend to recommend that your roof be newer than half of its lifetime. For an asphalt shingle roof, you'd really want it to be under 10 years old. Which is why it's great for metal roofs, because they have that 50-year lifetime, so you have a little bit more time to play with. You also do want the roof to be in good condition, and the quality and age of your roof are important because it can be really expensive to take down your solar installation in order to put up a new roof or to repair a roof, because then you have to have the solar reinstalled. So it's really best to try to get all the work done at once. Now, if you don't have a roof that's suitable for solar, Or if you just don't want solar on your roof and you have the land for it, you can always opt for a ground mount. There are some trade-offs between a ground mount and roof mount, and it's almost always true that a ground mount is going to be more expensive than roof. And that's because you have to pour concrete to stabilize the structures. And you'll also dig trenching to bury the power lines that carry the electricity from the panels back to your house. But there are benefits to a ground mount. Primarily, you can pitch and orient your panels so that they are perfectly positioned to maximize their power production. They're easier to clean because they're on the ground, so you don't have to get up onto the roof. They also run more efficiently, and that's because the air is better able to circulate around the panels, and cooler panels run more efficiently. So there are definitely trade-offs for solar versus ground mount. But when you join the co-op, you can let us know where you're thinking about installing the solar. So you can say you want a roof mount or a ground mount. And if you have multiple structures, or if you want to do a ground mount, you can put a pin on the map of your home, and that'll let us know where you're thinking, and we can do a remote analysis of that land and make sure that it's a good fit from the outset. Once you've produced your current from the solar panels, so it's going to produce what's called direct current. Your solar panels generate DC, but your home uses alternating current, AC. So you have an inverter, and the inverter has three main functions. So first, it's going to switch that DC to AC so that it's usable electricity in your home. Then it's also going to do a power optimization. So as sunlight conditions change on each individual panel, there's a different level of voltage and current that give you the most power out of your solar panel at any given time. So it's going to be calculating that maximum voltage and current so that you get the best power production out of your panels. And then the third function of the inverter is that it actually is the computer of your solar system. It connects to the internet, and it allows you to monitor your system remotely, and it'll share your power production into an app that you can access either on your phone or your computer. Now, there are a few different types of inverters. The first is a string inverter, which basically takes all of your panels, strings them together, and does all of those functions in one place, in that one box that's usually close to your electrical service panel. It's really good for simple systems because there isn't a lot of shade variance, so it doesn't have to handle a lot of differences. If there's too much shade variance over your roof, if say you had a tree on one side and half of your panels are shaded and half aren't, then there's too much difference between the two sets of panels, and then your inverter will revert to kind of the lowest common denominator, and you may end up losing a little bit of power. If you do have a roof that's going to have a lot of shade variance over the course of the day, it might be better to do either the string inverter with DC optimizers or the micro inverters. So micro inverters are an inverter that clips right onto the back of every single panel. It's a lot smaller, and it does that calculation to optimize power in place. It also does the inversion right there in place. So this is really good for a roof with more variation in shade. It's also nice because you can monitor your power production at the panel level. The hybrid solution is that string inverter with a DC optimizer. So there again, you have a single inverter, but you have the power optimizers that clip to the back of each panel. So they can do that calculation at each panel, but then the inversion is actually all done in one place. So it's not important for you to have a preference between the different types of inverters. Your installer will offer one or maybe a few different options. And if they do offer multiple options, they'll let you know what their recommendation is based on your system's needs. So once the power goes from the inverter, it'll feed into your electrical panel. And this connection is really simple. It's done by the installer. And oftentimes you don't really need any kind of upgrade before going solar. But if you have an older home or a home with a small electrical box, you may need an upgrade. You might need a sub panel, or you may need a full replacement. When your installer comes out to do a site visit for your home, they will let you know what kind of upgrade you would need if you do need one. But as a co-op member, you know ahead of time the pricing on any kinds of upgrades like that, so that it isn't a surprise at the last minute if you do need an upgrade. And so now we can take all of those components and put them together into a single solar system. So first you have your solar panels, and envisioning a beautiful summer day, we have the sun just drenching the panels in sunshine, and it generates direct current. That DC goes into the inverter, it gets switched into AC, and then it feeds into the general energy mix in your electrical panel. Now, if you're, say, using your lights in your home, that power goes in and feeds your lights. If you're not using any power at home, then it goes to your utility meter, which is now bi-directional. It reads both directions. And if you're overproducing, all that extra power goes out to the grid. So this does show a grid-tied system. It is still the most common and cost-effective way of going solar. It is useful here to introduce the concept of net metering. So this is your utility's method of accounting and compensating your solar production. So that two-way utility meter is kind of the key to the net metering. So in the summer, you're going to be overproducing. You'll produce a lot more than you end up using for your home, which means that a lot of that generation is going to go out to the grid. So all of those kilowatt hours that you're not using get put into a bank. And then in the winter, when it's cloudier, darker, and you're just not producing as much, you can spend down that bank. That way you are never without power, and any extra that you need, you get from the utility. Now, the billing cycle for net metering runs from June 1st to May 31st. So at the end of the year, you're going to be compensated for what's left in your bank, and that's going to be at a slightly lower rate than your month to month. So the other part of net metering is that every single month, all of that excess generation that you produce, your utility is going to take it and give it to your neighbors and sell it to them at full retail rate. So net metering is a way that they can compensate you for your excess energy that you're basically giving to them. So in Pennsylvania, net metering is really good. It's for every 1 kilowatt hour that you export to the grid, your utility will pay you for 1 kilowatt hour at the full retail rate. So it's that one-to-one compensation at full retail rate. And that, like I said, is month to month. As you spend down your bank at the end of the year, whatever is left over, they will compensate you at a lower rate. Now, the way that you'll see net metering is in your utility bill. So this is an electric bill for someone in Penelec territory. It may look fairly similar to one that you might see. And so this billing period is from February to March, so not the sunniest of months. And at the beginning of this period, this person had 1,135 kilowatt hours. And during this pay period, they gave the grid 718 kilowatt hours and received from the grid 725 kilowatt hours. So they were able to cover all of their energy usage except for 7 kilowatt hours. So their bank was reduced by 7 kilowatt hours down to 1,128 kilowatt hours. So I think that shows too how much you can overproduce in the summer, that they were able to bank by February 1,100 kilowatt hours. And during a winter month, they only had to spend down 7 kilowatt hours. Now, the effect of this is that their whole bill is essentially zeroed out. They were going to start with a $100 bill, basically. And what it dropped down to was $10, which is that fixed customer charge. And all of that $90 that it got reduced by was because of net metering, because they had overproduced. And so when we talk about solar paying for itself, it's here in your electric bill, the massive reduction in energy charges that you see. That is how solar is paying for itself. Okay. Now, in the United States, power outages are increasingly common. And this is because of weather events and aging infrastructure. In this chart, you can see that if we take out major weather events, the average American lost about 2 hours of electricity per year from 2013 to 2020. That's that dark blue line, pretty stable. But when you add in weather events, it grew to an average of 8 hours per year in 2020, the most that it has been in history. So more people want to be able to have power in their home when there's an outage. And they think that if they have a solar system and it's grid tied, even if they lose power, they'll think, well, the sun's shining, I have solar, I'm good. But the way it works is if the grid shuts down, your inverter, well, your meter is listening to the grid as well as to your own system. So if it recognizes that the grid has shut down, it will shut down your power as well. You will also experience the power outage. And this is a safety mechanism. It makes sure that you're not backfeeding energy into the power lines when there might be line workers out. So if you want power during an outage, you probably want to consider battery storage for backup. And with the co-op, you can get pricing for batteries for an EV charger as well as solar panels. And you can go with any one or combination of those. So batteries are still fairly expensive. The prices are coming down, but it's usually not economical to back up your entire home. So you might want battery storage if you do have frequent utility outages, but also if you have critical loads that you want to cover, things like a well pump or medical equipment, but also if you're interested in emergency preparedness and you want to cover a modem or your fridge, freezer, lights, things like that. And it's definitely something that I know more and more people are thinking about as we experience more power outages. So let your installer know if you're interested in batteries, even if you're not ready to go with batteries right now. They can design your system so that you can easily install battery backup later on. That way you kind of save a little bit of money on that installation. And we do have a guide for battery storage for homeowners. It's at solarunitedneighbors.org/storage. We also have a 1 hour long webinar on the topic. Okay. And like I said, with the co-op, you can get pricing for solar panels, for batteries, or for an EV charger. So with an electric vehicle, when you pair an EV charger with solar panels, you can see where your fuel is coming from. And you also will have much more predictable and stable costs for fueling your car, so that when there are gas price hikes, this is very timely, you won't experience that. You'll have that stability in your fuel for your electric vehicle. And so the level 1 EV charger is one that comes with an electric vehicle when you purchase it. It is for a standard 120 volt outlet. It is a fairly slow charging speed at just 4 to 6 miles of charge per hour. So with the co-op, you can upgrade to a level 2 EV charger. So this is an upgrade to your outlet. It's a 240 volt outlet, and the charging speed is much faster. It's 10 to 30 miles of charge per hour. And the typical warranty on an EV charger is about 3 years. And there are various costs associated with an EV charger, the unit itself, as well as installation. And that kind of depends on if you're going to mount it outside as a standalone station or against your garage wall, and then how far it's going to be from your EV, because that charging length is actually a huge part of the cost. But so altogether, the total cost is somewhere in the $1,000 to $3,000 range. There are incentives to help you pay for an EV charger, and I am going to go over those in a little bit. So now I'll address some frequently asked questions that we get. So the first is about warranties. And with solar, there are 3 main types of warranties that you're going to consider. The first is a labor or workmanship warranty. This one comes from the installer, and it covers any issues from the installation itself, like damage to your home or roof, problems with the electrical work or leaks. And it can really vary widely from, we've seen it cover 1 year to the lifetime of the panels. Second is a manufacturer's warranty. So this covers the equipment like the panels and the inverter, and these are typically 10 to 15 years. And it says that if your equipment fails, then you can get it replaced. And finally, there is what's called a production warranty. So this comes from the manufacturer for the solar panels, and it's a measure of how the panel's efficiency degrades over time. So there's 2 ways that you might see this warranty. The first is it'll say by year 20, the panels will have at least 80% of their original efficiency, for example. The other way you might see it is each year the panel will lose no more than 1 or 0.5% of its efficiency. So it's a really good way to compare panels to each other. And then part of joining the co-op is that you get a package of plain language on those warranties, so you can more easily understand what is included. Next, we get asked about homeowners insurance and will the premium raise or lower. So you're more likely to see it raise, and that's simply because you're adding to the rebuilt value of your home. Some insurers may lower it if they have a sustainability initiative that they're trying to add to, but we would just recommend that before you go solar, you do check with them so that there are no surprises. Maintenance is a key selling point to solar. They are incredibly low maintenance systems because there are no moving parts. On a pitched roof, you can expect snow and rain to slide right off, and you really don't expect maintenance issues over the lifetime of the panels. But we do recommend that you have someone come out and check them every 5 years or so, and your installer may be able to give you a recommendation on somebody to do that for you. You'll also probably catch any production issues if you are monitoring your panel production at the inverter app that I talked about earlier. So you'll have an app that you can look at on your phone or your computer that will show you how the panels are performing. And so if you're monitoring that, you'll catch early if there are any issues. So solar systems, the panels themselves last 25 years. And in Pennsylvania, the payback period is typically between 8 and 12 years. So it is a long-term investment. If you're planning on moving soon, it may not be the right time for you to go solar, but we do know that solar adds to the resale value of your home. That has been shown in a couple different studies. One was through the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, as well as a Zillow study, but they basically saw that solar is this really cool asset that lowers the cost of living. So a lot of people want it and are willing to pay more for it. So that might be a way to recoup some of your investment. Will my HOA allow solar on my home? So in Pennsylvania, there is no state law that requires HOAs to permit their members to install solar. That's what's called a solar access law. And typically with HOAs, if it's not explicitly permitted, you can assume it's not allowed. So we highly recommend that you read your governing documents, and we at Solar United Neighbors are working really hard to pass a solar access law. So if this is something that you care about or that you would like to see passed, please get in touch with us, because we are working very hard to make solar accessible for everybody. And finally, what if I'm in an historic district? So this is going to be pretty similar to the HOA question. Oftentimes it's more explicitly stated, and there may be restrictions on where you can place the solar panels, like they may not be able to face the street, or they may just outright tell you no, but your installer can help you with that. You may also need a special permit, and the installer will also work with you on that. It's really case by case. So if you have questions, please reach out so we can help you as much as possible. And then I will pause here to take any questions.
So we do have a question from Lindsay in the chat.
Okay.
And looks like it's three different questions. So the first one is, does roof pitch / steepness affect whether or not a solar array can be installed?
No, because you can install solar on a pitched roof, you can install it on a flat roof. It shouldn't affect your installation. No, I can't imagine that. It would be unusual, I think, if it did.
I think I have seen some installers have an adder, like they charge a little extra for particularly steep roofs.
Okay.
It's not universal though. So, it's harder to work on a steeper roof.
Sure.
Yeah, but in most cases, it probably won't be a deal breaker. Lindsay's next question is, are there programs for those who both want solar and need a new roof, potentially interested in metal roofs, which are a great choice for solar, to accomplish both at once?
Sorry, can you ask that again, Henry?
Sorry.
Yeah.
Are there programs for those who both want solar and need a new roof to accomplish both at once?
Oh, I see. Not through the co-op. We highly recommend that if you need your roof replaced, that you focus on that first, because that's really the key to a good, long-lasting solar installation that isn't going to cost you even more money down the road.
Yes, good advice. And then also from Lindsay, what's the deal with Tesla roofs? I think she's talking about the solar shingles, solar roof, and how do they compare with typical solar arrays?
So I don't know offhand what the average efficiency is for the Tesla shingles. But so essentially, for anybody who's not familiar, the panels are large and they sit on top of your roof, whereas the solar shingles basically replace some of the shingles in your roof. And so they're much smaller and thinner. The issue that we've seen with the Tesla shingles is that there are so many more of them that there are more points of connection, and every point of connection is a loss of efficiency. It's also a potential point of failure. So They can be really good for people who need to replace their roof and don't want to pay for those two things separately. So they decide, I'm going to replace my roof and I'm going to replace it with solar shingles. But because of efficiency and because I haven't seen any lifetime studies for the Tesla shingles either, they're newer, so there's much more that's unknown about them. I also, so far, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Henry, we haven't seen anyone bid on a co-op with the solar shingles. So that hasn't been an option for a co-op yet, but if you go solar on your own, you may see that from an installer, but I'd probably have more questions for them about those systems.
Yeah, and this field of solar shingles is still pretty new and a lot of stuff is changing. But I have recently heard about a new manufacturer called GAF that offers solar shingles. It's called Timberline Solar. I know there's at least one company in Pittsburgh who does it. Probably not one of the companies who's going to bid on this co-op, but that is something to look for if that's something you want to learn more about. We have another question from John. Does the panel box amp matter? I think he's talking about the electrical service, the amperage of the electrical service panel. We're looking to replace ours and get solar down the road. If so, what would be a recommended amp?
Oh, I'm sorry. I think I missed the middle part of that question.
We're looking to replace ours and get solar down the road. Like what should he get now to be ready for solar?
I think what I've heard for recommendations, as long as it's not a huge solar system, I think you can typically get away with 100 to 150 amps. I think smaller than that is not recommended, or you may look at needing an upgrade. Yeah, I hope that helps.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
I think it's a fairly small system that could fit with a 100 amp panel. So a lot of residential systems, more than like 5 or so watts will probably need like a 200 amp panel. And that's, that can be a couple $1,000s. So that's something to keep in mind. That can be a surprise cost for some people when they're going solar.
Right.
And we have a question from Leah. I'm also in the situation of needing a new roof. Do you have recommendations for roof replacement choices that will make a solar installation easier? Great question.
I guess I'm wondering, do you mean what material to replace your roof with?
That's how I interpreted it, Leah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess if you had your pick, I think I would recommend metal just for the lifetime of it. And because installation for solar panels means that you don't have to do any kind of penetration. You can either clamp, or if there's no standing seam, you can just weigh down the solar panels. So that makes solar installation much, much easier. But if you do have a roof at an angle and metal isn't for you, I think asphalt is probably the easiest for an installer to work with. We tend to see adders for if you have a tile roof or a slate roof. So maybe just because that material can be a little bit more temperamental, I guess try and avoid those.
Yeah, some installers just won't touch slate roof. Requires some specialized skills to be able to get up there and not break stuff. From Lindsay, what are the next steps if we're curious about the co-op this year or in the near distant 3 years future?
That's a great question. So I am going to talk towards the end about the co-op a little bit more and what to look for as we progress through the co-op. If you're thinking right now isn't the right time, then I'll also talk about that and some other options for you. But I guess one of the big things is, in the meantime, look for barriers to going solar, whether that is a roof that needs replaced, or if you have a really big old tree that you were thinking about taking down anyway, that's going to shade your roof too much, it might be time for that. Anything that's going to make installation more expensive or more difficult later, you can start thinking about those things now.
From Leah, can you do metal on a steeply pitched roof, currently asphalt?
I think I've seen those, yeah, and they're typically the ones that are the standing seam so that you can clamp right onto those seams. But yeah, I don't see why not. I guess I'm not a roofing expert, I should say that. So I definitely would recommend talking to different roofers and seeing what your options are. And then just knowing that for solar, asphalt and metal are tend to be the most common. And since metal has the longest lifetime, it tends to be a nicer choice for a solar system.
Another question here. Let's do one more and move
Okay.
on. I think. How soon will an installer be selected? We had some installers stop by this week to get quotes, and they said they're already booking late summer and fall.
Okay, so this is a great question. The installer selection is going to happen, I believe, the end of March. I don't know the exact date offhand. And so then within the week, so by, that first week of April, you should start hearing from the installer, maybe give them a couple of weeks because we do already have a lot of people signed up for the co-op. But so the installer will start reaching out to people early April, and then the installations themselves will happen over the summer and towards the fall.
And that's it.
Okay, great. So now we're going to get into the second part of the presentation, which is the economics of going solar. Okay, so since the inception of solar photovoltaics in the 70s, the costs have just dropped astronomically. Even just within the last decade, the cost of solar has dropped by 73%. And this is at the same time that the cost of electricity has risen about 40%. So we are seeing a lot of people choosing to go solar in the context of ever increasing energy bills. And solar is not really seen anymore as a specialty project. It's not just for that really nice house in the neighborhood. It has a really great return on investment. And because of that drop in price, it's really becoming more and more accessible to so many people. And then there's also this really great federal tax credit of 26% that I am going to talk about in a couple of slides. But the reason that, so the solar co-ops that Sun has run, we have consistently seen across our co-ops nationwide that the cost of going solar is about 10 to 15% less than the average person who goes solar by themselves. And the reason that we see that drop in price, even relative to the decreasing cost of solar, is because of how the cost of solar breaks down. So there's three main components. In the yellow, you can see it's the system component. So these are the physical pieces of solar. It's the roof racking, the panels themselves, the inverter, and those costs have dropped in the past decade. Then in green in the center, those are the labor costs. They're relatively constant within the last 5 or so years. But then on top is what are called soft costs. And these are the growing proportion of the cost of solar. So soft costs are anything that's not labor or the physical components. So it is things like permitting, marketing that the installer does, customer acquisition costs, And it's that component that the co-op helps you save on. We bring a group of well-informed potential customers to the installer, so they get to skip customer acquisition entirely and pass those savings on to the members. So here is some example pricing for going solar with the co-op. So there are two different sized systems. There's a 5 kilowatt system and a 9 kilowatt system. So I will tell you off the bat, the 9 kilowatt system is about the average size solar system for a co-op member in Pennsylvania. And then 5 kilowatts is oftentimes the smallest system that an installer will do. It's not the smallest, but it's commonly the smallest. So with the Pennsylvania co-op pricing at an average of $2.54 per watt, a 9 kilowatt system is going to be a ticket price of $22,860. And I'm going to focus on that 9 kilowatt column. But after the federal tax credit, which again, I'll explain in a slide or two, your net cost of your solar system is going to be just about $17,000. So from there is when you start saving on your electric bill every single month. And in that first year, you're expected to save $1,100. Then those savings accumulate so that at 10 years, you're at $12,000 that you've saved. And then by the end of the lifetime of the panels, you've now saved $33,510. So by the end of the lifetime of the panels, you have saved what you spent and then that much again. Your net profit is more than your net cost of going solar. And the great thing is that scales with the size of the system that you have. So you can see the exact same trend for the 5 kilowatt system. And that would be true if you got an even larger system. But the other part of going solar that can be a nice extra source of income is what is called the Solar Renewable Energy Credit, or the SREC. So an SREC is an outcome of a policy in Pennsylvania where electric utilities are required to sell customers a certain amount of electricity as generated by renewable energy sources. And in Pennsylvania, 0.5% is required to come from solar, but utilities can't generate energy on their own for reasons. And so what they'll do is they'll actually pay you and other solar owners for your solar energy so that they can sell it to others and meet that requirement. So the way they compensate you for that energy that they're buying is through what's called an SREC. And it's for every megawatt hour of energy that you produce, they will pay you. Now, since the state requirement for Pennsylvania is so low at only 0.5%, the value of the SREC is also low. It's around $30 to $40. But for your first 5 years, if you have a 9 kilowatt system, you would get $1,700. So it is a nice extra source of income, but it's also a reminder that policy drives the benefits of solar. So if we had a bigger mandate for solar in Pennsylvania, solar owners would see more benefits in the form of SRECs. So now we can talk about that federal tax credit. So it is currently at 26% through the year of 2022. So this is an income tax credit, not a tax deduction. It's a non-refundable credit. And it basically means that if you go solar in this year, 2022, then next year when you file your taxes, your tax bill will be reduced by 26% of the total cost of going solar, which would include batteries if you did get batteries. If you don't have that full tax liability. It's not refundable, but you may be able to roll it over multiple years, I believe up to 5 years. And so it is 26% this year. Next year, it drops to 22%, and then it hits a cliff and it goes to 0%. So this is an incentive that could be fixed by Congress, but we have seen how those negotiations go. So there are no guarantees, and we would highly, highly recommend that if you are thinking about going solar, that you do it now so that you can benefit from this tax credit. But if you have more questions about how the credit applies to your specific finances, we would recommend that you talk to a tax professional and get more advice there. And then there are a few different ways that you can finance your system. First is a cash option. It is the highest upfront cost, but everything after that is savings. So you really maximize your total lifetime savings. Secondly, are loans. And I'm gonna go over those more on the next slide, but you can learn more about financing options at solarunitedneighbors.org/financing. And then there's an option that's known as third-party ownership, and this covers power purchase agreements or PPAs and leases. And this is essentially where a third party owns your solar panels and you're leasing them, so you don't own them at the end of their lifetime. It's more common in suburban areas, but I will say that this has not been an option for a Pennsylvania co-op yet, so I'm not really going to spend too much time talking about these. And then the other option is through grants. The USDA Rural Energy for America program, the REAP, is a grant and loan options that are offered to rural businesses and business owners so that they can make energy saving upgrades, and it covers things like energy efficiency as well as going solar. So if you are a business owner, this may be a great option to help you pay for your solar system. And then for loans, so most commonly, homeowners will choose to go through the home equity line of credit route. You can also refinance and choose to include your solar. There are other types of loans, and installers will often offer financing through their own financing company. And then also co-op members do have access to loans through the Clean Energy Credit Union or Community First Credit Union. You only have access to these loans through being a co-op member. They often have really low fees, but as with any of these loans, you really want to shop around, make sure that you understand the terms, and get the best deal for your system. And then we are also offering the electric vehicle charger, and there are incentives for both electric vehicles and for the chargers. We know that EVs are really popular, they're getting more affordable, and about half of homeowners who have solar or an electric vehicle actually have both. And there are federal, state, and local incentives to buy EVs. And there are also incentives for the charger where you can save up to $1,000 on that level 2 EV charger that you can get through the co-op. So if you want to learn more about those incentives, you can visit the co-op webpage, that's solarunitedneighbors.org/Allegheny. Okay, so I will pause there. If there are any questions about financing, which there often are, go ahead and ask those in the chat. Any questions, Henry?
Doesn't look like it.
Oh, okay. All right, then we will finish up with the last section, which is about the solar co-op. Hopefully why everybody is here today. Okay, so The solar co-op, we now have over 300 of them around the country. It is a well-oiled machine that we have seen consistent results through. And the benefits of going solar with the co-op is that, we aggregate a lot of consumers together so that you can go solar all at the same time through a competitively selected installer. It helps you to save money on your installation, although we can't guarantee that, and I'll talk about that in the next slide. But we also at Sun help support you through the process. We give you that technical guidance. We'll help you parse the sales pitch and make an informed decision that you feel confident about. We'll also help connect you with your solar lovers in your neighborhood, and you can become part of a broader impact. At the end, you are a Solar United Neighbors member, and we will keep you up to date with policy changes so that you understand what could impact you as a solar homeowner, and then also help you in the fight to help more people go solar. So the co-op process, it is typically a 6 to 8 month process. We launched on Tuesday, and you are at step 1. You're learning here at the info session. And in the second step, after the presentation, we hope that you will sign up to become a co-op member. It is free to join, and there's no obligation to go solar or to go solar through the installer that the co-op chooses. But joining gives you access to the competitively priced offer from the installer. And then throughout the process, but that step 3 is really critical. It's spreading the word and growing the co-op to be as large as possible. We have a goal of 125 members, and we're already over 45 members. It's really incredible. And so that 125 member goal is really doable, but not without your help. So invite your neighbors, your coworkers, friends, anyone you know who has been thinking about this or you think just doesn't like paying their electric bill, which is so many people. Just share as much as possible about the co-op. We really want to have a huge impact in Allegheny County. So step 4 is the installer selection. So it says once we've hit 30 members, but we are going to have that selection process. It's going to be at the end of March. So we issued a competitive request for proposal for solar installer to bid on the co-op. So we'll review their bids and check their licensing, their insurance, references, make sure that everything is up to standard. And then we at Solar United Neighbors, we are vendor neutral. We think it's really important that the people who are going to get solar installed are the ones who choose the installer. So a group of co-op members come together for a night and they choose the installer based on the priorities of co-op members. So when that one installer is chosen, we let everybody in the co-op know. And then over the course of the next few weeks, the installer is going to start getting in touch with everybody who is a member. Then usually about 4 months later, there is a deadline. That's the last chance for anyone to join the co-op. And so throughout that time frame, the installers will be talking with you. They'll get your energy bill. They'll look at your land from satellite imaging, and they will design a customized proposal for you and for your energy needs, and they'll offer it at that co-op pricing. So up to this point, you are completely free to walk away, no hard feelings, no penalties, no obligation. But we hope that, if the circumstances are right for you, that you will sign a contract and go solar. And then it usually takes a few weeks to a couple of months for the installer to work through all of the permitting and everything. And then the installation itself only takes a day or two. And then a few weeks later, you'll have your finalized project and you'll have permission to operate, and your solar system will begin producing energy for you. After all of the installations are, kind of started, then we will all meet together and we'll celebrate the successes of the co-op and really talk about the impact that we had in Allegheny County. So I just wanted to spend another second talking about that installer selection, because it is coming up, and because you're potentially early members to the co-op, you do have the option of joining the selection committee. So it's one night, it's usually a couple of hours. We get together on Zoom, and ahead of the meeting, all the co-op members will choose, when they fill out their application to join the co-op, they will choose their priorities for an installer. And so the criteria, some of the criteria they can select from are the price, the equipment quality, warranties, the experience of the installer, and how close the installer is located to Allegheny County. And so based on those priorities, the selection committee will choose the installer that they think best meets the needs of as many of the co-op members as possible. And it's really important to note that price is not usually the most important criteria, that it's not a race to the bottom. We don't just want to choose who offers the cheapest system, that we look at it really holistically, and we want you to have the best possible experience in going solar. So that often means that you want an installer who has a lot of experience or who offers really great warranties. So it is really important to think about the selection as a holistic choice. So what is next? We really hope that after this presentation, you will choose to join the Allegheny Solar and EV Charger Co-op. And you can do that at solarunitedneighbors.org/Allegheny. We also hope that you will share information about the co-op with your friends and neighbors, either at the co-op webpage or this info session when you get the recording of it. Just share with as many people as possible. It's really important to grow the co-op. And then the other option is that we are going to have a meeting for Allegheny County volunteers. So if you're interested in getting more involved in different ways, you can attend that meeting. I think Henry's going to include the link to sign up for the meeting, but that's going to be on Tuesday, April 5th at 7 p.m. and that's also by Zoom. So I think at this point, we're going to launch a poll, and it's going to ask you about the ways that you would be interested in getting involved. So that's going to be up on your screen now, if you can take a moment and answer. And then depending on how you answer, we will be able to get in touch with you later on. We can let you know about more details about the meeting. If you're interested in sharing on social media, that would be amazing. Oh, and then I'm actually going to talk about the crowdfunder in the next page. So more details to come. And you can choose more than one option if you're interested. Oh, wow. You guys are very interested. That's awesome. It's great to see. Okay, I'm going to leave it up just another couple of seconds. All right. Well, thank you everyone so much. Okay. And so now to talk about that crowdfunder that you saw a little teaser for in the poll. So like I said at the beginning, part of this co-op is making solar possible for working families. So we are doing a crowdfunder to help add to that pool of money to pay for free installations for low-income households. We know that in Pittsburgh, those low-income households have some of the highest energy burdens in the country, especially in Black households. And so we want to be able to provide these solar installations to really reduce the energy burden for these families. And so we have the money to provide 6 free installations. The need is so much greater than that. So any amount really, really helps. And we, that website at the bottom, solarunitedneighbors.org/Hazelwood, is where you can donate. It is tax deductible. And please, if you're willing to share information about the co-op, I hope you're also willing to share the crowdfunder with your friends and family as well. And we're doing this to demonstrate the benefits of solar for working families so we can make the case for full-fledged low-income solar program for our region. The more successful this program is, the more likely we're going to be able to replicate it across the state. So we're really hoping to make this successful. And with that, I am finished. I want to thank everybody for spending your Thursday night with us learning about solar. I hope that you are invested in going solar, and if it's a great time for you, then I hope that you will join the co-op. You can do that at solarunitedneighbors.org/Allegheny. If you have any questions for us, you can always reach out to us at pateam@solarunitedneighbors.org.